This final part of the series, we're going to look at the Battle of Thetford, and then we'll conclude with a brief look at the Parliament and coronation phases and how they work. If you're following along, I first want you to do a couple of things for me. Go to your crown deck and grab a couple of nobles for Beth's army. Beth is De Vere's faction. I want you to find Ross and Holland. Ross and Holland, okay? We're going to imagine we've had a Parliament phase and Ross has been made Admiral of England. This title has managed to find its way to Ross. We'll make Hastings Earl of Wiltshire instead. Holland is Duke of Exeter, which was actually up in Talbot's hands, right? Yep, Duke of Exeter. They've also got Steward of the Royal Household, which was given to Audley. Audley's gone. Let's take Audley out of the game. So get rid of these, stick them back in your crown deck. Discard, grab Steward of the Royal Household. And that's going to go here on Holland. Okay. All right, so we've got 2 extra nobles titled with offices. You're going to give Ross the Breton men-at-arms. Okay, so we'll give them an extra 10 troops. Okay, got it? So this is going to be De Vere's faction. And we're going to do a little switcheroo as well. We're going to take away the Scots archers and give them to Hastings, and then take the Bishop of Norwich and the town of Norwich, or city of Norwich, from Hastings. Okay, now we've set up our scenario. Beth's army to take on Oscar's army. So here's Oscar's army. Oscar, before we get there, is going to do a little transfer. So the ship's going over there. Edward of Westminster is going to stay here. Pole, Duke of Suffolk, and then poor old Scroop all on his own. Okay, all right. And lastly, I want you to take the Earl of Westmoreland from Cromwell. We'll put Constable of Dover Castle in the Chancery, since it doesn't have anywhere to belong. I want you to take this card and place this in Oscar's hand with the Marshal of England. So they've got 2 cards in their hand. And we should give Beth, the De Vere faction, a card in hand as well. So go back to our crown deck. Let's just grab a card for Beth. Now in the walkthrough it says she's got some Flemish crossbowmen in hand, but that can't be true because they're there with Pole, Duke of Suffolk. So we'll call it Flemish handgunners, right? So go grab Flemish handgunners and stick them in Beth's hand. Okay, there we are. Now we're set up properly for the walkthrough. Remember the actions here in Thetford. So grab the noble tokens. So we've got Ross and Holland. Let's say they're all down here in Colchester. Okay, so let's say, because this is a controlled castle. And here is De Vere, the Earl of Oxford. Now somehow, through a couple of moves, Berkeley and Pole are over here in the field of Thetford. And Scroop has made his way from Massam to join them. So these guys are all sitting in a stack in the field of Thetford. And on Beth's turn, she moves up to join them. Okay, so with a regional movement, they move to the same area. And this is where these stacking zones come in helpful. So we can take the stacking chip for Oscar, the stacking chip for Beth, and we can place their respective tokens down here. Right. So there's our nobles all lined up, and the poor old Edward of Westminster minding his own business. It's a fascinating game, the way that the designer gave the royal pieces no agency at all in the game. They're just completely under the control of those who are wielding the real power, the nobles. And here they are. There's a battle to be raged. So Beth ends her turn. She's finished her movement step. Now we move into combat. Now, unlike a siege, there's no fortification involved here. This is a battle in the open field. Now remember, Edward is actually here under the control of Berkeley. These battles in the open field, like siege attacks, they're not compulsory. It's up to Beth. So she could choose not to attack at all, or if she does attack, with which nobles? She doesn't have to attack with all of them. So she's going to choose all three. She's going to attack with all three of these nobles. She then designates who she's going to attack. So if there were multiple factions here, not allied, then she has to choose one of them. Okay, as it goes, it's only Pole's faction, it's only Oscar's faction here that can be attacked. And they're considered a single stack. All right. She can't choose to miss any out, so she can't just say, oh, I'm just going to attack Berkeley. All right, but it has to be the whole faction or whole of an alliance, but not multiple factions who are not allied. Make sense? Okay. So all three of Oscar's defending nobles are in a stack now, considered in a stack of defenders, as are Beth's attackers. Now we look at their relative strengths. Ross has a strength of 60, 110, 120. De Vere has a strength of 30, 50. Now, it says 30 troops in East Anglia. Thetford is in East Anglia. Okay, so these do count, right? But we're not in Lancaster, so it's just 50 here. So that's 80, 110, 110, okay, for De Vere. And then Holland is 50, 70 is 90. Okay, so 120 plus 110 plus 90 is 320 for Beth. I'm going to write that down for you so you remember. And then on Oscar's side, we have Berkeley with 10. They're not in Cornwall, so that's a 50, not 150. So that's 90, 100. Okay, 100 for Berkeley. Pole has 30, 80. Bishop of Durham doesn't count because we're not north of the River Trent. Okay, so that's 100 with the Flemish crossbowmen, 100 for Pole. And then Scroop is a mere 10. So that's 210 for the defenders. What we're trying to do now is work out the odds. It's not a simple, am I greater than you, like it was for a siege attack. This is a battle between two nobles now. So what we do is we go to our player aid, and in the center here is a table of odds. Find the weaker side's troop strength in the left-hand column. So the weaker side is 210. Okay, 210. Then read across the row and find the stronger side's strength, 320. If the weaker side's not listed, you choose the smallest, closest strength in that row. So for example, if it was 310, you would just go back to this column here. Makes sense? All right, but we're reading across 210 versus 320, 210 versus 320. So we've made it into this column. Okay, the top of that column has the strength for the odds of the battle, 3 to 2. Okay, 3 to 2 odds. What we're going to do now is draw an event card, and we'll decide whether the attacker has been victorious or not. This tells you that in order to get a victory, you need at least 4 to 1 odds. This one here says 5 to 4 odds would do. So would 3 to 2, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, or 4 to 1. So if the odds are listed on this card, then it's a victory. So that card will be a victory for Beth. This card would be a failure for Beth. Do you see? Okay. So some of them will give you good odds. Some of them like this. Some of them will give you poor odds like this. Okay. Now you're going to have to get to know the game. What are good odds? What are bad odds? At the moment, Beth's looking for 3 to 2 odds or lower. Now, obviously, if your troop strength is lower than the defender, you're never going to win. You can still attack. We'll come back to that with an example in a bit. But here we are. We're looking for a favourable event card draw. But there's still stuff that each player can do. Before we draw the event card, starting with the defender, players can add cards from their hand. Remember, you can add crown cards to your nobles and thereby adjust the odds. Alternatively, if you feel that there's a chance that you might lose, you can even kill royals. Okay, so you could kill Edward of Westminster for fear that he might be captured by the enemy. Okay, that's still an option. Oscar has cards in his hand. Remember, he's got 2 cards in his hand. Now, he doesn't have to do just 1 card. Oscar can allocate 1, 2, as many cards as he wants. So he's going to take Scroop and give Scroop a title, Earl of Westmoreland. Now, Scroop is up to 50 units. That adds another 40, so he's up to 250. But better than that, now that Scroop has a title, he can take an office. So he makes Scroop Marshal of England as well. So that adds another 100. So now Oscar's up to 350. How about that? So you can, these cards in your hand have suddenly changed the course of the battle. Well, we know Beth has a card too, so it's her time to add cards if she wishes. But all she has is 20 Flemish handgunners. That will only add 20 to take her to 340, which is less than Oscar's 350. That's a guaranteed fail. The best odds an event card's going to give you is majority. So you need to have at least 360 here to stand a chance of winning. So those handgunners are not enough. But it's okay. Once you've played cards and recalculated the odds, the attacker can at any point prior to drawing that event card call off the attack. But once they've drawn that event card, then the battle must be resolved. And at that point, you can't then start killing off royal pieces. You can't add any more crown cards. You have to resolve it as it stands. And there's no penalty for calling off the attack. So right now, Beth calls off the attack. She says, okay, with those odds, I'm out. And there's no consequence. The battle fizzles out. The nobles are left standing in the field and play continues. Now, of course, Beth's had her turn. She's going to finish her end of turn now. The turn's going to get back to Oscar. And suddenly Oscar finds himself with a majority army. So Beth draws 2 cards as usual for the end of her turn. She decides to keep a new noble, Greystoke, in her hand. It's not going to help her with this battle, and the turn passes to Oscar. Oscar starts his turn by drawing an event card. He draws a French raid. It says the Admiral goes to Rye with 2 ships, and then the Warden of Cinque Ports to Pevensey with 1 ship. Okay. Now it just so happens the Warden of the Cinque Ports is not in play, so ignore that. But the Admiral is, Ross is the Admiral. They are the Admiral of England. So Beth has been a little bit stitched up. Admiral of England to Rye with 2 ships. We haven't placed them on the board, but they're going to go to Rye, as is the Admiral. Actually, while we're down here, I do need to point something out. You notice Rye is controlled by an unfortified town, the port of Rye. And similarly, like the port of Dover here, you see there's 2 fortified locations here. Canterbury doesn't control the port, it's Dover. The rule is it's the nearest fortified or unfortified town or location. So in this case, we've got an unfortified town controlling Rye. And you can't control an unfortified town, they don't come with a garrison. So Rye is effectively an open port and always will be. Make sense? So that means I do have to make a little correction to something I said way back in part 2. Thanks to Alan Paul for spotting this one. Up in Boston, which is up here, the yellow players controlling Tattersall, but they don't control the port. The nearest unfortified or fortified location to the port is actually Boston. So Boston, this port here is also an open port. It doesn't matter who controls Tattersall, Boston's always open, so that control marker shouldn't be there. They don't control the port because the port is controlled by an unfortified town. Make sense? So look out for that. You do have to be a little bit cautious about which place is controlling the port, and it's the nearest town to it. Anyway, that was an aside. Back to the Battle of Thetford. Now remember, Ross has 120 troops. So they are incidentally pulled out of this battle. So Beth now only has 200 strength. Well, that was a good event for Oscar to pull. It certainly changed the shape of this battle. So, without moving any pieces, Oscar's now going to attack. So another battle ensues. So once more, we go to the chart. Remember, look for the lowest odds, 200 down the left-hand side, right? The weaker side. We're looking for 350 along the right. Or we need a 400 to get 2 to 1. We have to go to the next lowest, which is 300, 3 to 2. Odds are 3 to 2. Oscar thinks about it. What does he do? Does he go or does he not go? No one's got any cards to add. So he goes to pull a card. And again, we're looking at the black section. Remember the odds. Okay, we're looking for something better. There's a victory on 4 to 1, 3 to 1, 2 to 1, 3 to 2, or 5 to 4. There we go. Oscar has gotten his victory, and none of his nobles are killed. Herbert and Cromwell are listed, but they're not involved in the battle. The highest strength army wins. That's Oscar. If Oscar had drawn bad weather delays the attack, it's exactly the same as if the attacker withdrew. It just didn't happen. Everyone stays where they are. No one wins, no one loses. The event card's discarded. It's not a fortification, so there's no siege going on. It just delays the attack. It's over. And it gives a chance now for Beth to respond. What about if the odds were bad? What if they drew an event card and it's only, this one says 4 to 1 victory? In this case, the battle is indecisive. There is no victory, but it's not a loss either. It's the same as if bad weather delays attack. And the only difference is potentially nobles are getting killed. Just be aware, if there's only one noble and that noble is killed, even if they pulled a victory, treat it as an indecisive. Okay, you can't win if you don't have a noble left standing. Likewise, if you've got more than one noble killed, you can only lose one noble. Okay, so if you happen to have both Cromwell and Audley here, you don't lose them both. It's the same as a plague. You lose only the one with the highest troop strength, and if they're both equal, you choose. But there we are. That's the result that happened. Beth lost the battle. Both Holland and De Vere are now captured. This goes back to the discard pile. Beth has no presence here now. They might negotiate ransoms for either of these nobles, but if you can't be negotiated, then they're both executed. They don't come over to Oscar's side. Either they're negotiated or executed. So in this case, Oscar wants to execute them. The offices and titles will go to the Chancery. We'll do a quick count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards. They're going to the Chancery. And we've got 2 nobles and a bishop. These 2 are going to the discard pile. And the bishop, Oscar can take this because he's got a noble that doesn't have a bishop or archbishop. Pole's already got one, so he can give it to Scroop or Berkeley. Let's give it to Scroop. He also then takes the city of Norwich. And look, he's gaining prestige all the time. Okay. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 so far. He also replaces the control marker on Norwich with his own. And because Oscar won a major battle, there were titled nobles on both sides, will win a major battle prestige card, which will gain him 2 more prestige. They'll assign it to one of the nobles in the battle, so let's give it to Scroop, since Scroop was the one who pulled the thing out of the bag at the end there, and takes an extra 2 prestige. He's up to 8. Beth, on the other hand, has lost a whole bunch of prestige and only has 1 now. But having lost 6 crown cards, rally to the cause, she'll draw 3 more. And they go in her hand. You'll notice there's no hand limit here. And that's it, we've finished the battle. You'll notice that Oscar is now in a very strong position. He's got control of a royal. He's got 2 bishops. And that's significant when we come to talk about the coronation phase. Just before we do, though, I wanted to consider another situation. I want us to consider what would have happened when, or if, Scroop on his own a force of only 10 decided to do battle with a much larger force. Anything other than a bad weather delays attack will immediately kill all attacking nobles. Irrespective of what comes out on the event card, you ignore this section. All the attackers are captured and ignore any killed nobles. Okay. Bad weather delays attack, well, you live to fight another day. Let's say that Scroop attacks and he's got a force of 210, okay, against 320. So the attacker has the weaker force. Okay. We can't win. We can't win. But again, you go to the lower force, which is 210. You pull 320. Odds are 3 to 2. You pull an event card. If you get odds like 4 to 1 here, there's no victory, then it's an indecisive battle, and everyone lives to fight another day, apart from those named nobles. But if you pull a card like this, where 3 to 2 is a victory, the victory goes to the larger force, in this case, the defender. Okay, so this victory always goes to the larger force, and nobles killed. In this case, Scroop was killed. So it's a risk. The attacker can do it. They can't win the battle. Why might they want to be doing it? Well, bad weather delays attack makes them fight another day. But what they're really looking for is a lucky break. It's kind of like an ambush, really, that one of the defending nobles might be killed. But of course, it's a big risk because there's a chance that they themselves will be killed. But it's doable if you've got a lowly little noble that you don't care about. But less doable in Kingmaker 2 because of the new very weak odds battle. You ignore the result on the event card. If you can't get odds of 1 to 4, then you're done for. So that kind of removes that ambushing rule where you might just throw someone like Scroop under the bus into a no-win attack in the hope of ambushing one of your opponent's nobles. Okay, we've pretty much covered everything. We want to look at a coronation now, and this is where these bishops come into play. We're back on Oscar's turn. We've come back around again. They're holding Edward of Westminster. Let's say for some reason plague has struck London and killed Henry VI. Margaret of Anjou has suffered a similar fate. Edward finds himself as next in line to the throne, but he's not throned yet. He's uncrowned, right? Oscar decides to move his stack of nobles to Norwich. Norwich is controlled by Oscar, so we can go inside, and you'll notice that Norwich has a white cross on the top. A white cross is a cathedral city. Remember our sequence of play: event phase, movement phase, combat phase, no battles going on, parliament phase, coronation phase. Okay, what happens during a coronation phase? We're in an area with a cathedral. We've got our nobles here. And amongst those nobles, we need one archbishop or two bishops. Pole, Duke of Suffolk, is also Bishop of Durham. And Scroop, Earl of Westmoreland, is also Bishop of Norwich. We've got two bishops. That's it. We're in a friendly location with two bishops and a cathedral. We can now announce, because there's no more senior royals in this family, that we have crowned Edward King Edward. And with that, we take his royal card, we'll flip it over, and if he's a sole king, which he is right now, it will award us with 4 prestige as opposed to just 2. If there's another king, if there's a Yorkist king, so if he's one of 2 kings, it's only 3 prestige. But it is enough to put Oscar up to 10 prestige points. With 4 players, they only need 1 more prestige to claim victory using a prestige victory. For a royal victory now, they have to eliminate all the Yorkists from the game. Now, maybe someone here now tries to ally and do the job for them and share in that victory, or they may have to do it alone. Note too, when you're looking for prestige from a royal, only royals on the mainland of England and Wales give you prestige. Okay, so if you do take control of Richard, Duke of Gloucester, it doesn't count until you take him over to mainland England. So no turtling away in Calais thinking no one can get at you. You have to take them back to the mainland for their prestige to count. Thematically, an absent royal is a forgotten royal. No prestige is earned. Okay, that's the coronation phase, nice and simple. Last thing to cover is Parliament. So we're pushing through the turns, we're pulling out event cards, and then suddenly a clamour for Parliament comes in. This goes here on this space. Parliament can now be summoned by a sole king, which we have right now, King Edward of Lancaster, or if there's no kings or two kings, by the Chancellor of England with an event card. Chancellor of England is Hastings, and we know they've got the Chancellor may summon Parliament card. So on Oscar's turn, because he's got the sole king, only Oscar can do this. Only Oscar meets the conditions of having a sole crowned king. If Beaufort wants to do this, because he's Chancellor of England, he's got to find a way to crown a Yorkist or get rid of Edward. But like I say, if the Chancellor can crown Richard of York or ally with someone who can, then they could summon Parliament because there'll be two crowned kings. But let's go back to Oscar. So it's going around to Oscar's turn. He's got the sole crowned king. Clamour for Parliament is in play. He draws his event card. He moves his pieces. He does combat. Next is Parliament phase. Let's say Oscar has picked up another couple of nobles in their hand. Okay, Grey and Fitzalan. But they're pretty weak. What they really need is some titles and offices. Oscar decides on his turn he's going to play these nobles and then summon Parliament. So Grey and Fitzalan, they each have 2 castles each. There's one down here in Arundel. So Grey could be here in Rockingham. Okay. The king, it's the king that's calling Parliament, with the noble that controls him obviously, must occupy an area containing a town or city, so somewhere like Bristol. It must be friendly, so you can't do it in an unfriendly town or city, or even an unfortified town. Remember, no one can control towns, so you could even go, say, do it in Bath or Wells or Salisbury, any of these places. It has to be in England, it can't be in Calais, so you can't do it in France, and also it can't be a besieged location. Okay, that place is currently enjoying a little bit of war, so it needs to be a friendly fortified or unfortified town that's not being besieged and not Calais. This is where Parliament's going to happen. Okay, this is where the king is, this is where Parliament's going to happen. So let's say we're going to call Parliament in Bristol. At this point we must name a noble from another faction, not an allied faction but an enemy faction, and that enemy must attend Parliament. Okay, so you're going to pull them from wherever they are down to Bristol, down to where the Parliament's happening. Let's say I choose to pull Clifford from outside Chester. As with event cards, we can't summon a noble that's at sea, we can't summon a noble in Calais, and we can't summon a noble on one of these 3 islands. Okay, Isle of Man, Anglesey, Isle of Wight. They're placed immediately in the area. Maybe we wanted to pull that noble because we wanted to weaken Chester at the same time. You'll find tactical reasons for selecting the nobles you want to select. Now, optionally, starting with the player who called Parliament, players may have any other of their nobles attend Parliament. So let's say they want, we start with Oscar. He wants these 2 new, he wants the Earl of Arundel to come in, Fitzalan, and Grey from up here. They're pulled in with no limits on movement, okay? They're just pulling them across the map. If Parliament is happening in a friendly fortified place, then you can have these nobles enter the fortification if you wish. That's fine too. Or stay out in the field, but obviously if it's not friendly, then you have to stay out in the field, but you're still attending Parliament. Okay. So Clifford here is out in the field, but he's still attending Parliament. Other players may join in too. So Beaufort may say, actually, do you know what? I want to come as well. So Duke of Somerset comes up and joins the action. Once we've gone around, the king then takes all the cards in the chancery and gives them a shuffle. And note there's only 4 cards in the chancery. At the moment we've got 5 nobles in Parliament. So we're going to draw all of them. But if there were less, let's say there are only 3, we would just draw 3 of these 4 cards randomly and put the other one back in the Chancery. But there's 5 here, we're going to draw all of them. Then the king reveals all these cards and must award these cards to any nobles. It doesn't have to be just the ones attending Parliament. Any nobles. Okay, so the idea of pushing your nobles in Parliament is to get more cards out of the Chancery. Okay. Now, of course, you've got to stick to the rules. So you can't have more. A noble can't have more than 1 title. An office must go to a titled noble, and a noble can't have more than 1 office. So as it goes, we can give a title and an office to, say, Grey. Earl of Arundel, Fitzalan can take an office, but obviously the Duke of Suffolk can't. Now we've got 1 office left over. If we can assign it, we must. Are there any titled nobles without an office? Well, I think there's only 1, and that is the Duke of Somerset, so they get the steward of the royal household. If there were any offices or titles that we couldn't hand out, they would just get discarded back to the discard pile. They're out. Now, the other benefit of coming into Parliament is that nobles who are attending, with the King's permission, can exchange offices. Not titles, but they can exchange offices between them. So if you want to exchange offices between some of your nobles, send them to Parliament, and then you can start shifting offices about, if you like. Okay? If you're not in Parliament, you can't do it, but only with the permission of the one who called Parliament. You can see the Chancellor is a very powerful office. One thing to note, actually, you can't assign titles and offices to, although I said you can assign to any nobles, you can't hand out titles to nobles who are at sea or under siege. Okay, so putting a noble under siege does prevent them from attaining office during Parliament. So you can see Beaufort here did get an office, but they didn't really need to attend Parliament in order to get the office. Does that make sense? Okay, because there was only 4 cards in the Chancery, and there were already 4 nobles in there. Okay, so think about it when you want to attend Parliament, when you don't want to attend Parliament. Really, you're attending Parliament if you want to shuffle offices between your nobles, or if you want to some reason push up the number of cards getting drawn out of the Chancery. But it is the King's discretion. But remember, this is a negotiation game. You can haggle. You can try and bribe the King. Right, Parliament's concluded. What happens next is there's a King's Peace token. The King's Peace token is placed in the location of Parliament, which was Bristol. Combat of any kind is not allowed in the area of Parliament for 1 complete round. So Oscar called Parliament. No combat is allowed here until the end of Oscar's next turn. So at the end of Oscar's next turn, we'll remove the King's Peace, okay, after the combat phase. Clamour for Parliament's turned sideways to show that Parliament's concluded. And when King's Peace marker is removed, you discard the Clamour for Parliament. And why is that important? If there happens to be more than 1 Clamour for Parliament here, you can't call Parliament again until this card's been discarded. Okay, because it could be that these are stacking up. Remember, there's 4 of them. It paces Parliament nicely through the game, but it also means Parliament can't be called again too soon. And there we are, folks. We've concluded our Kingmaker guide to Kingmaking. There's a lot to learn, and there's lots of nuance to the game and lots of little secrets to be discovered. It's one of those games that benefits from playing and really learning. Play with the same group. I mean, there's so much knowledge in the event cards, which nobles are good, and Kingmaker 2nd is creating this wonderful new way to explore the game. For now, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.